Good morning and welcome to another edition of Maritime Reads. My name is Nina Ferry-Montanil and I am the reference librarian here at Oak Bluffs Public Library. Every Sunday for the month of September, I'm reading excerpts from our Maritime collection for our 5th annual Maritime Month in honor of Gordon Goodwin. This morning, I'm reading a book about the South Pacific and the voyagers who sailed the seas without compasses, without navigation, simply by using the stars. The book by Sam Lowe is called Hawaiki Rising. Sam Lowe is an anthropologist and he spent a number of decades traveling around the South Pacific. In addition to the book, we also have a DVD called The Navigators. It follows the same anthropologist on his journey through the South Pacific. So if you are more of a visual learner, I think it would be really nice to complement the book with this DVD. As you may or may not know, I spent a number of years in the South Pacific before returning home to Martha's Vineyard. I lived in Fiji, New Zealand, and Australia. While there, I fell in love with the land, the ocean, the people. It's a very spiritual place, and I'm so happy that we have books in our collection that can help us understand the ancient culture and the spirit. This is from the preface from the author. He is accepting mistakes of pronunciation or also of misquotations here. Like the author, I will also accept responsibility if I mispronounce one of these words. I will try my hardest to think back on my days living in Fiji and New Zealand to try and pronounce these words correctly. The title of this book, Hawaiki Rising, has kaona, or multiple meanings. It is the name of the mythic homeland of the Polynesian people. It refers to the nautical concept of raising land from the sea, as when a mariner says, "We raised Oahu," meaning he saw the Hawaiian island rise above the horizon as he approached it from the ocean. More personally, it refers to the dream of the legendary Hawaiian waterman, Ediaiku, of seeing Tahiti rise from the sea on a voyage aboard the Hawaiian canoe, Hokulea. It also evokes the legend of the Hawaiian demigod Maui, who created the Hawaiian Islands by pulling them from the sea with his magical fish hook, Manae a Kailani. And finally, it celebrates the raising of the Hawaiian consciousness in their great seafaring heritage and their pride in it by voyaging aboard Hokulea in the wake of their ancestors. Now the Hokulea is a double canoe and with sails, and it is still around today. There's some nice photographs and diagrams in the book, and this is what the Hokulea looks like. Nainoa Thompson wrote the foreword to this book. Growing up in Hawaii in the 1960s, I found my Hawaiian culture ebbing away. I had never seen an authentic hula, attended a traditional ceremony, and seldom heard our language spoken. It was a confusing time for me, and I felt lost between worlds that seemed in conflict. All that changed one night when Herb Caen introduced me to the stars and explained how my ancestors had used them to find their way across a vast ocean to settle all of Polynesia. At that moment, my vision of my ancestry became timeless and alive in those same stars. Our canoe, Hokulea, and our dreams have now carried us over 150,000 miles of ocean, following in the wake of our ancestors who discovered and settled Polynesia. It has been a process of finding ourselves, not only as Hawaiians, as native to these islands, but also as natives to the planet Earth. On all of our voyages, we have been guided by the wisdom of our elders, our kupuna. Among them is my father, Myron, also known as Pinky Thompson, who understood that voyaging is a process in which we are guided by values that are universal. Before our ancestors set out to find a new land, my father told me, they had to have a vision of that island over the horizon. They made a plan for achieving that vision. They prepared themselves physically and mentally and were willing to experiment, to try new things. They took risks. And on the voyage, they bound each other with aloha, so they could together overcome the risks and achieve their vision. You find these same values throughout the world, he said, seeking, planning, experimenting, taking risks, and caring for each other. The same principles that we used in the past are the ones that we use today and that we will use into the future. No matter what race we are or what culture we carry, these are the values that work for all of us. Hokulea embodies the mana, the spiritual power and wisdom of all who have sailed aboard her or laid their caring hands on her. We'll head to one of those sailing journeys now. Bring her down. With this command from the navigator, my watchmates and I threw our weight against the steering paddle to bring our vessel off the wind. We are aboard a sailing craft the likes of which have not been seen for centuries. She is called Hokulea, Star of Joy, and she is a replica of canoes that once carried Polynesian explorers to discover and settle thousands of islands in a vast watery domain known as the Polynesian Triangle. For 21 days, we had sailed through storms and uneasy calms, and now we were nearing our destination. Our navigator, Nainoa Thompson, had guided us here without compass, sextant, or chart, by signs that only he could read, the paths and shapes of constellations, the curl of ocean swells, the winds. It is an ancient art practiced for millennia before the discovery of Polynesia by European explorers. Our voyage took us northeast from Tahiti, 2,400 miles until today when Nainoa ordered us to steer directly west. Running with the trade wind, a gossamer mist wafted over the canoe, parting ahead and reforming behind us as we continued on. Except for catnaps, Nainoa had been on watch the entire voyage, willing himself back to a time when his Polynesian ancestors sailed across similar expanses of ocean. Now, having observed signs invisible to the rest of us, he was certain that the island of Hawaii lay directly in our path. The mist to the north and south moves, he told me, but ahead of us it seems to stall. It sits there like a constant fog. That makes me think there is land ahead. There was also the wind. For a time it held steady from astern and we sailed wing on wing, one sail to port and one to starboard. Then the wind shifted southeast, making it hard to fill our sails without changing course. For those of us manning the sweep, it was an annoyance. For Nainoa, it was another land sign. The trade winds cannot rise over the high slopes of Mauna Kea. So when they encounter the volcano, they split and flow around it. One branch flows southwest down the Puna coast. The other flows southeast along the Hamakua coast. When the wind veered southeasterly, it was an indication we are north of Hilo. As the sun descended, Nainoa observed a slight shift in the density and the color of the sky ahead. To the left, I see a brightness on the horizon. Looking to the right, it is dark, until farther right, it becomes light again. Where it is dark, there is land breaking the rays of the sunset. To demonstrate, Nainoa joined his two open palms to form a V, one hand pointing to the opening on the left, the other to the opening on the right. You can triangulate our position like this, he said. My left hand points to the opening to the south, my right hand to the opening to the north. Where my two hands join is where we are. I think we're to the northeast of Hilo, maybe 20 to 25 miles away from the Hamakua coast. None of us can see these signs. We do not doubt they exist, but to predict our position within a few miles after such a long voyage seemed impossible. We tacked the canoe to starboard. The Hamakua coast, if it was there, was invisible in the darkening mist. Slowly, by latent instinct, we became aware that something large lay to port. We felt it, a kind of pressure. The feeling drew us to the rail, where we stood peering into the darkness. Then the clouds began to lift, and we saw the twinkling lights of Hilo on our beam. Speaking for all of us, Nainoa said simply, "We are home." I'm going to read one more short passage out of chapter 7 in the book, The Spaceship of the Ancestors. I think it helps us connect the stories of all voyagers, no matter where they are sailing on the ocean or what island they are from. And it helps us connect Maritime as an ongoing existence in the lives of so many people around the world. This chapter is called The Spaceship of the Ancestors. A seagoing vessel is an exquisite structure. Her shape is sinuous, composed of compound curves that fold into one another that never seem to end. She has a beauty that most human beings perceive directly, and that appeals to some so completely they are struck silent. There is a dream in those shapes of voyaging to far-off lands and of confronting something deep within you, the limits of your courage and your endurance. An ocean-going vessel is like a poem because it stands for so much more than its mundane purpose of carrying sailors and cargo across the seas. It's a metaphor of freedom, of casting off the lines, of shaking loose from land-bound cares and setting out on a voyage of self-discovery. These attributes of a sailing vessel are universal. Their allure crosses cultures and time. An aficionado of such vessels equally appreciates boats that sailed the Nile 5 millennia ago, those that carried Lord Nelson into the battle at Trafalgar, and those that compete today in match races to win the America's Cup. But for Hawaiians who beheld Hokulea, something stirred in addition to all of this, something that was deeply personal. "I feel my ancestors all around me," Tava had said. The canoe carried a song from a time before remembering, a time so far in the past that it had been forgotten, or worse, a time that had been erased from memory so as not to reawaken an ancient hurt. Better to look forward, not back, as some Hawaiians said. But Hokulea overwhelmed such resistance. She sat there. She was real. She was the spaceship of the ancestors. This is what Billy Richards had called her. Sam Kai saw the canoe as a flower in the lei of memories that extended back to the first people to set sail from an unknown place in Southeast Asia. If you're interested in checking out Sam Lowe's Hawaiki Rising or in the Navigators, Pathfinders of the Pacific, come into the library and they are on the second floor in our Maritime collection. You can also give us a call or go to our website and reserve them. Until next Sunday, enjoy this beautiful day and check out our Maritime programs by going to our website, oakbluffslibrary.org. Thank you for joining me.